Can't hear anything.
Oh my gosh, was I muted?
Yeah, you were muted. I'm
Oh.
like, I can't
Well,
hear
we're going to restart then.
Okay.
So I'm not sure how that happened, but welcome everybody. I'm Jonathan Broadbent, your host of UnWoke.Academy. Welcome to a very special episode. I was apologizing there at the outset for a brief delay because once again, I was grappling with Rumble. I love Rumble channel, but my gosh, the settings, getting them just right with each episode seems to be a periodic battle. But we are up and running. We're live on multiple different streams and platforms. And we have with us tonight a very special guest, Laura Shar from Gold Standard Elections. We're going to get into the whole kit and caboodle. We're going to lift the hood on U.S. elections. I am honored and grateful to have Laura joining me. Actually, the first time on video, first time I'm able to see her face to face, but she was actually my guest on AssembleX Ohio. If you're on the social media platform X, formerly Twitter, I do actually run something called AssembleX. And periodically, just for perspective, because I think some of my audience at least is in Ohio, and because Ohio makes a good test subject for all things elections, I'll probably reference Ohio's election systems. But anyway, all of that introduction aside, welcome, Laura.
Well, thank you for having me, Jonathan. I really appreciate it. Always like to talk about elections.
Awesome. Well, it's a hot subject. I mean, even for the people who have kind of compartmentalized and maybe put it in the back of their minds, I think still on some level and really across the board, Republicans and Democrats, if we're going to be honest about it, both sides cry foul. It seems like every election cycle, one side's pointing at the other one and saying, you did it wrong and you're illegitimate. So what the heck? How can we trust these election systems?
Yeah, exactly. Back in 2020, many of the conservatives were, wait, something's really wrong. This doesn't seem right. We need to investigate this. This is outrageous. We're sure that Trump won. And now after the 2024 election, you have people on the other side saying, oh, I think Elon hacked the election. I think we have to look into this. So it flip-flops, you're right, every 4 years. So, I work with South Carolina, as you know, and I have South Carolina Safe Elections, and I also work with the Gold Standard Elections team. We are all nonpartisan. What we really care about is that everybody's vote is counted, and it's counted correctly. And until we have a system that we can trust and we have full confidence in that system, it's going to be doing the same thing, flip-flopping. Well, my guy won. Well, if it wasn't my guy, then it must have been a cheat.
Yep.
So we have to fix these elections.
Just so you know, Laura, and for our listening audience, two things. One is we are set up for live comments. See, I'm so
Love it.
choked up about this issue. I'm losing my voice. We
I
are
am
set up
too, by
for
the
live
way.
comments. If you would like to ask Laura a question, feel free, post that. And if I can, I'll incorporate that. I'll put it up on the screen and get your question answered. If not, feel free to message me directly. I'll work on getting answers to you, or better, more to the point, find Gold Standard Elections as a website. You can find Gold Standard Elections, at least on social media platform X. I follow them there and periodically tag them. By the end of this conversation, we're going to make sure that you have all the ways of accessing this information and learn about Gold Standard Elections, who they are, who they represent, what they do, and all the nuts and bolts. But I'm going to interject that we had a conversation in the lead up to this live stream, and I referenced this terrific video montage. Laura, I do have that queued up. I can share it if you think that it fits into the conversation.
Oh,
That
which one's that?
that's that video montage of a whole bunch
Oh,
of.
yes, yes, yes. Yes, go for it. Do it.
Okay,
And
you
then
know what?
I want to break some news, Jonathan, because
Oh,
there was a lot going on in the trial yesterday, in the Lindell versus Coomer trial, and it was pretty shocking, and nobody's reporting it. So I want to talk
huh.
about that. Yeah.
You know, I always wonder, the old adage, if something splashy happens in the news cycle, look for what's really going on. And we saw today, I don't even remember the guy's name. Some guy apparently crashed the press media coverage, or the media conference for Kristi Noem, and the Democrat Party has been in a loud uproar all day. And so if you're breaking news, and wait, hold on, I'm going to tease this to get our audience to watch this video. After we come back from the video, you can break the news, tell us about what's happening in that trial.
Yes.
But it got me thinking. I mean, there's so many people talking about what happened and what didn't happen with this. I think it was a senator from California, I think. Go figure. But I think maybe there's something to it. Maybe what they're doing is hiding yesterday's court reveal by being splashy and dramatic today.
Could
Possible.
be. Could be.
All right. Well, I'm going to drop us off screen. I'm going to put up this video. And just so everyone's prepared, you won't expect this from me, my unwoke audience. But I'm actually going to put up a video montage of all Democrat, fairly far,
Democrats. That's right.
well-known, far left, liberal Democrats. But stay tuned. You do want to see this.
Virginia just stopped using touchscreen computer voting because it's so vulnerable.
Right.
We need to look at all the voting machines. Every Secretary of State needs to be, assisted in making sure that they are not being hacked and attacked.
I continue to think that our voting machines are too vulnerable.
Researchers have repeatedly demonstrated that ballot recording machines and other voting systems are susceptible to tampering.
Even hackers with limited prior knowledge, tools, and resources are able to breach voting machines in a matter of minutes.
In 2018, electronic voting machines in Georgia and Texas deleted votes for certain candidates or switched votes from one candidate to another.
The biggest seller of voting machines is doing something that violates Cybersecurity 101, directing that you install remote access software, which would make a machine like that, a magnet for fraudsters and hackers.
These voting machines can be hacked quite easily.
You could easily hack into them. It makes it seem like all these states are doing different things, but in fact, 3 companies are controlling that.
It is the individual voting machines that pose some of the greatest risk.
There are a lot of states that are dealing with antiquated machines, right, which are vulnerable to being hacked.
Workers were able to easily hack into an electronic voting machine. It was possible to switch votes.
43% of American voters use voting machines. that researchers have found have serious security flaws, including backdoors.
We know how vulnerable now our systems were. I know the hackathon that took place last year, where virtually every machine was broken into fairly quickly.
I actually held a demonstration for my colleagues here at the Capitol, where we brought in folks who, before our eyes, hacked election machines, those that are being used in many states.
My view
screen. It goes on from there. And folks, I'll put that in the show notes. I'll add it to the goodies afterward. Share that around, because anyone is like, yeah, you conspiracy theorists, you're always talking about the whatever, fill in the blank with whatever
We
the
were
latest thing
election
is that's about to be
deniers. We
true.
were election deniers, Jonathan.
Right. Oh yeah, yeah. We're election deniers. Well, I call the other side when the equation flips and they deny that this exists. I call them election fraud deniers.
Yeah.
So
So I agree with what they said for once. I agree with the left on something they were saying. And that was, I'm sure, back right after 2016. So it was probably in 2017. But we didn't hear them saying too much after 2020. They were
Yep.
like, yep, everything was fine. In fact, let's keep counting the votes. Several weeks later, no problem there. So what was interesting that happened yesterday that I'm surprised no one's really covering, and it is because there's a fairly tight kind of a gag order going on for the Lindell Coomer trial. It's a defamation trial. But yesterday, they interviewed a man named Dennis Montgomery. And Dennis Montgomery is the one that claimed to have developed this system called Hammer and Scorecard that could hack and infiltrate, for lack of a better word, these systems, these voting systems, and pretty much any other computer. And so this is what he said yesterday. This is reporting that was on X through Ash in America. It was actually a Gateway Pundit article this morning, but it said, when asked if Scorecard was designed to bypass a firewall, Montgomery said that it was one of many names for it and that Scorecard did what needed to be done, leaving no footprint, like it never happened. Then he says, when asked about states that were impacted by Scorecard in 2020, Montgomery said all of the swing states were, and more, that Scorecard was in every state. Did you hear about that in the news today? I bet you didn't. When asked how he knew that, Montgomery said it was from the data, but that he couldn't discuss the sources and methods by which he obtained the data. Montgomery stated that he might have told Lindell the election was hacked, but doesn't recall if he said it was specifically through voting machines. However, he did say that he told Lindell that Dominion voting machines were hacked. He testified that he was the only person who knew how to use Scorecard because he had CIA embedded in his building and met with them every day. He said Scorecard was used in Panama, Venezuela, Colombia, and was first used in Brazil in 2004. And he goes on to say, when he was asked if it was used to keep Hugo Chavez in power in Venezuela, he said, yes, it was. He said that Hammer and Scorecard are capable of hacking 75% of election systems in use today, but it had attempted to hack all 3,300 counties.
So he's admitting that Hammer and Scorecard. This is a court. Where do we
This is
find more
under
information?
oath. This is under oath in
Under
a
oath.
huge court case between Eric Coomer, who was the previous, whatever at Dominion. I think he was CEO at one point. Maybe I know he was involved in the programming, and then it's a defamation suit, and he's suing, of course, Lindell. So it's between the two of them. The judge allowed originally Dennis Montgomery's testimony, his depositions were sealed. And this judge allowed him to testify. And this is what he said yesterday. So this is what we've been saying all along. We election deniers have been saying something's not quite right. There were there was a lot of information on Hammer and Scorecard. There was a lot of good reporting done by Mary Fanning and at the American Report. And so he is basically under oath confirming what we all thought to be true.
Where are you getting this information? Where can the rest
This
of us
was an
find out more
article.
about
This was an article that was released this
Gateway?
morning by
Gateway Pundit?
Gateway Pundit, and it was based on people who were in the courtroom. And one of them who's been reporting on X is Ash in America. She's been doing her
Oh, yeah.
own, reporting of it in real
Ash.
time.
Ash in America. I have to.
ASHE in America.
Yep. I'll have to make sure that that comes up and that we're sharing that information. We have a periodic author on Gateway Pundit, Alicia Pau, was a guest on this program. For our listening audience, you may remember the interview I did with Alicia. She's written for several, and I'd have to pull out. I have some show notes somewhere. I'm pretty positive that she has and continues, I believe, to do writing for Gateway Pundit. She's, just as a side note, because I just love these journalists who risk it all, not going
Yes.
for the big CNBC and MSNBC and CNN and stuff. Great journalists who make that knowing sacrifice of getting out there and getting us information like the stuff that Laura's reading to us. So we've got to recognize those journalists who are doing the right thing and they're not towing the line. So thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Yeah. It was breaking, and I haven't heard much about it today, but to me, that's pretty sensational. And it also, to me, it almost feels like there's a bit of a drip, drip, drip going on. Like Trump will say, and he said it a couple times recently, I won. And of course, he said it a lot, but recently he's reinforced it by saying, I won big. I won big in 2020. That was a stolen election. So he's continuing that narrative. Vance has said we should go to, paper ballots, one day of voting. Elon said, absolutely have to use non-computerized systems, non-electronic. And Tulsi just recently mentioned that she has seen evidence of the infiltration of these systems. And we know, listen, we saw it. I don't know if you remember this, Jonathan, but there was another trial in Atlanta against Raffensperger.
Yep.
And basically, he was able to hack a system with a pen in just a number of seconds. So, and he had complete administrative control.
I did see that one. There are so many examples out there. It's really, it's just it's almost mind-boggling when we run into people who are like, well, there's no evidence. Like there's so much evidence. I don't even know where to begin. And some of us who watch these sorts of things and pay attention got really excited about the great case study of Bridgeport, Connecticut. That was about a year ago, where we had circumstances that were virtually identical to what we saw happen in 2020. And there were it happened to be two Democrats, and they went both up in arms, and you couldn't tell. And one was accusing the other of fraud. It went before a judge. The judge looked at all this evidence, and the evidence, I'm telling you, audience, I mean, of course, Laura, the evidence was like it could have been lifted out of the evidence of the 2020 elections. These people stuffing massive stacks of ballots in these, little grainy late night footage at 2 a.m. where they're stuffing it in the ballot box. All of it. We got to the point where the judge in that case in Bridgeport, Connecticut was like, there's just no telling.
Yeah.
This is so muddy and murky. There's no way to know who actually won, and called for a recount. Or excuse me, a complete redo.
A new election, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, a new election to start over again. And so those of us who were paying attention were like, come on, that should have been 2020, clearly. Because, I mean, but, just a note, because, I mean, if you're in my listening audience, you know me, I can't help but include the side notes and my perspective. And then I want to get back to the more important part, which is Laura's knowledge. But personally, I count myself in that group of people who actually thinks there's a big silver lining to the fact that 2020 happened and that the White House was given to the Biden administration. I'm air quoting that, the Biden administration for 4 years, because it woke a lot of people up to the current real circumstances in and around DC and our election systems. But I'll quit. I'll quit my additional commentary. The big question that I think a lot of us have, Laura, is paint a picture for us. I've been watching videos of, and they're spectacular. Go! I'm telling you, I'm going to find as many as I can and follow Laura and find the videos of people trying different systems, testing them for accuracy, for speed, for cost. But walk us through, what does it look like transitioning a county somewhere from the electronic voting machine systems to a hand count?
Yeah, well, first off, you have to look at the whole system, because even though we talk a lot about the computerized systems and how they can be hacked, there are actually several components, and it's very complex. And here, that's part of the problem. The election officials don't understand it. The poll workers don't understand it. We as voters don't quite understand it. It's a big black box system to us, right? And there are multiple attack vectors. There are multiple areas along the way that are vulnerable. So we can't just fix one particular piece of the system. So to go and just completely re-engineer the entire ecosystem, that's what we've worked on over the last couple of years, actually, 4 years plus, but we really dug into this in the last 2 years. And we wrote a white paper called Gold Standard Elections, and it's up on goldstandardelections.com and also my website, scsafe.elections.org, and you can download that. So it starts with the first phase. There are 4 basic phases: voter registration, voter validation, and then you have the tabulation, which is the marking and counting, and then the reporting. So first, if you really want to clean up the system, you want to clean up the voter registration piece. And that would really involve people re-registering, maybe we need to just clean the slate and have everybody re-register. That would be one way that we can head to the gold standard. The other thing that we can do is we want to make sure that only eligible people are voting. So we're going to require proof of citizenship, an ID, a nice photo ID, but you also have to prove your domicile, where you live. Because what we're finding in the voter rolls, Jonathan, is people are registered at UPS, at post offices, at a Dunkin' Donuts, at a vacant lot, at a graveyard. We've seen a little bit of everything, right? And so when they register, they have to, at least in South Carolina, that is our law, you must be registered at a domicile. So all those things really need to be cleaned up first, garbage in, garbage out. The next step is when you go into the your precinct or your polling location, we want to make sure that when you show up, you're once again providing your ID that shows you're an eligible qualified voter and you are in fact on the list. And hopefully we don't have things like same-day registration, which is ridiculous. The electronic poll pads, we'd like to get rid of those. Because number one, I don't know if people realize this, electronic poll pads, where you sign in and you show your ID and, you check in, they're not certified. No one's looking at those. And by the way, they are connected to the internet.
Yep.
Now, an interesting thing about those, it's happened in quite a few areas now. And one of our good friends and co-authors of the white paper had this happen to her in Dallas County. She actually was checking the amount of people that were coming in the door, and she has a paper poll book to kind of reconcile with the electronic poll book. And she also would check that to the tabulators to see how many votes had been cast. Well, at the end of the day, there was a huge spike. And when she went to go reconcile the numbers, they were off. And so we can't trust the electronic poll books. Now, we also had some instances of places recently where they were using those and they just were not working. They were crashing. So ideally, let's go back to like paper and pens and checking people in the old-fashioned way and having them sign their signature. So that'd be another way to do it. Now, the third area is where we've spent a lot of time, and that's with the hand counting of hand-marked paper ballots. So people will say, oh my gosh, that's like, we can't do that, because they see it as being backward, right? But what they don't realize is we used to have these neighborhood local elections that people would get there, we'd count the votes, we could see it, we knew what was happening, we recognized the people when they came in the door. Well, that's been completely changed, and we've abdicated responsibility for our elections, and we've given it over to whom? To corporations, the equipment manufacturers, to the third-party contractors. There are a multitude of those that work with our election officials. We've given it up to the state. We've given up to the feds. We now have CISA and CIS and all these federal organizations that are in the back door of our elections. We have Albert sensors that are now monitoring the traffic that's coming in and out of these systems, including our election machines. So we'd like to take it back and decentralize, give the power back to the people, and take it away from the centralized control that it is now. And how do we do that? Get back to your local neighborhood precinct, make it small, hand count, hand marked, paper ballots, one day of voting preferably, minimize absentee balloting because that's a huge vector for fraud, huge. And keep it simple. It's really simple. And I always say it's as simple as people, paper, and pens. So we've tested a multitude of things, and we believe that we can do it. And that's why we have gotten together a lot of people. We had an expo out in Dallas a couple weeks ago where people showcased several different methods. And it was great seeing those people show all the work that they have done, trying to, just perfect and optimize these methods.
Awesome. So I'm going to interject a few things. One is that in my state of Ohio, we're fortunate to have somebody I think is really, really good running for our Secretary of State, and
Yep.
that's Marcel Sturbich,
Mhm.
who actually went to that. You had occasion to meet Marcel,
I
correct?
did meet Marcel. He was
Awesome.
he was really an interesting guy. I enjoyed meeting him. He's got a lot of energy. I think I think he was actually enthused by what he saw. He really was. He did seem very, very enthused. And so I think he jumped on the bandwagon. I hope he did.
Everything that I see and hear from him, and he actually came and spoke in my county as part of his campaign trail. What was it? Just earlier this week, the beginning of this week. And I really enjoyed what he had to say. I think he's a candidate to watch. I'm really
Yes.
excited about his campaign. And here in Ohio, like pretty much every other state, and in particular, I think those states that on paper are Republican and people would just want to sort of chalk off as like, well, that one's okay because they're Republicans. We have some pretty major issues here that I've commented on. By the way, for sake of clarification of how this conversation is going to roll today, I'm one of those people that's made it a point to try to make myself educated. If I miss the mark on some things, I rely on people like Laura to step in and correct me. So I probably know more than most, but that I by far not. I'm far from the expert on these sorts of things. But I have put myself in the position of being able to make some informed comments and ask some questions. One is this is a particular issue in the state of Ohio. You mentioned those fictitious addresses or using graveyards or whatever for registration. In Ohio, we have an additional problem because we have these authorized third-party um,
Oh,
ballot drives. The
wow.
third-party sources that go out there and they collect and create ballots and turn them in. And there's one very public now instance of one of those organizations, I think it's called Black Fork, that stands accused of mass ballot fraud, or not ballot. What's the? I'm just drawing a blank on the form you
Ballot
fill out.
harvesting?
Registration.
A registration. So they're registering, they're not ballot harvesting. They're not getting completed ballots. They're trying to register a lot of people.
Yeah, let me back up. I used the wrong term. So there it is. There's me trying to be informed and using the wrong term. The registration. So there's a company called Black Fork in Ohio, and this isn't unusual. I think it happens all over the country. that do voter registrations. That's the word that I meant to use. They go around and presumably actually meet with real live people who are citizens, we would assume, and alive, and they fill out these registrations, and then they get put into the system. And in Ohio, if something is wrong or somebody moves or whatever, it's so difficult to get somebody removed.
It's very true.
Easy to get them on, hard to get them
That's
off.
right.
But one of the things, and I'd love your feedback on this, for your state and for Ohio and for the nation, when we find issues, okay, sure, there's legislation in place that makes it difficult to remove those people, but why on earth we have such a difficult time moving them to provisional status? Because that makes all the sense in the world. If there's some question somewhere, like we're not sure on this one, make them provisional. And we've not been able to get that done in Ohio. They automatically default. Yeah, I think even if you find out that they're registered as a graveyard or UPS or whatever, they have full legal regular ballot status. What do you know about that issue?
Well, there's a number of issues there. So, number one, you shouldn't be, I believe that the voting process should be very intentional. There should be a bit of friction. There should be a little action on your part. So you should be registering in person with your ID. People should not be registering for you. Secondly, you should make it a priority on election day to show up. Unfortunately, this whole thing about convenience has really been a problem because people want everything like just add water convenience. And there should be a little friction with voting. This is important. This is your voice, and you want to make sure your voice is heard. So if you're voting absentee, that ballot might get lost in the mail. There have been stories about post office personnel, for lack of a better word, just taking certain zip codes of completed ballots and trashing them, right? So why would you take that risk? So that's the one issue. The second issue is you're absolutely right. The National Voter Registration Act, also known as Motor Voter, really puts some pretty crazy, in my opinion, rules in that law that unfortunately the election officials can use to not take people off of the rolls. So I think they need to either abolish the National Voter Registration Act or reform it, refine it, revise it. To me, I'd scrap it and start all over, but that's just me. Because people can stay on the rolls for much longer than they should. And the rule of thumb is you have to wait 2 general election cycles in order to get, if they haven't voted in that time period, then poof, you take them off the rolls. And in some cases, they could be up on the rolls for 6 years plus, right? So I think I actually, and our mutual friend sent this to me, that Ohio just recently changed the rule that once you know that someone has moved, you can immediately take them off. And that should be the rule. Once you have verification that that person, and this came out from Frank LaRose, I think just this week, but once that person has moved and you've got confirmation of that, why are you keeping on the rolls if you've got confirmation? And once that person has deceased, why are you keeping them on the rolls? We found people were on the rolls 10 plus years after they were dead. So this just makes zero sense. And so you're right, that should be, if you're, and that's how they're taking, the thing is, they then get placed in what we call it is inactive status. So you go from active to inactive. That should be a separate database that has a firewall between it, because what happens, and we found evidence of this in some states, that they're injecting these who they know to be inactive voters. They know who's moved, they know who's dead, they know who hasn't voted in 10 years. So they then bring that person into the roll, vote for them, right? It's like a ghost voter, and then poof, take them right out. So that's the risk there. And so that's why we need to be maintaining these voter rolls very strictly. And you're right, if there's any question, if they do come into the um, if they do come into the polling place and they don't have their address just right, or it's an absentee and everything's not, copacetic, they should be provisional and they should have to be scrutinized more heavily. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Okay.
So there's a note that I made. It occurred to me to interject a great comment that I've heard. And actually, I think it was our mutual friend um, who made the comment. I've probably said it 1,000 times or more since. Vote in private, count in public.
Amen.
It's just so, when you put it that way, the moment I heard it, I was like, oh, I've been putting together these, like, I have this whole thought process and I've been trying to convince people with this like paragraph long, like, we should do this and we should feel confident and everything. I'm like, you know what? That just simplifies the equation so beautifully.
Yeah.
And we should get back to that. I mean, we have, and this, again, you can't help me, you'll humor me for a moment here. If you're on X, you may know my voice as one of the voices of precinct strategy. This is unrelated to voting, mostly, sort of. Dan Schultz and I talk about precinct strategy and the importance of getting involved in local politics. And we do that twice a week. Here's a plug for that. If you're on X, come and find Dan and me twice a week, Tuesday afternoons, 2 p.m. Eastern, and Friday evenings, 9 p.m. Eastern. My point in bringing that up in this conversation is that has everything to do with what are called precincts. And that is a local voting jurisdiction within your county. And once you realize that our whole system of government is really designed around that, it's the design and application of we the people governance. It's how representative government was built and designed to work in the country. And when you look at it through that lens, there's all kinds of beauty in that structure. I love it now that I know that is supposed to exist. But bringing vote tabulation, bringing the vote back to that local level, just looks to me beautiful. And connected to that, I'm going to interject that I do, when I can make it periodically, I wish I could go to every meeting, but I go to our local county board of elections meetings. And actually, locally, I don't even have to go there. There is an opportunity to tune in via
That's
remote. Yeah, and I think that's beautiful.
wonderful. Yeah,
But
that's
so
how everything should be. Very transparent.
go transparent, absolutely. I love it. In a recent meeting, there was talk of, and I'm in a rural county. There are not a lot of people here. There's a big land, a lot of
Great.
farms, and oh, I love it here. There's not. We don't have a big city. Not far from one, but that's another county. In my county, there's not that many people, but there was some sort of software update that changed the computer systems, and I listened in. Well, they agreed to a $73,000 software upgrade package, but then that sort of triggered retraining and changing the training manual for the digital processes, and there was this sort of domino trickle on effect. And I remember sitting there thinking, if we were just simply running our elections and we had ballots and, heck, I'm just sitting here, I, I have a pen in my hand because I'm making some notes. These are easy. This is
Yeah.
simple technology.
It's not complex, is it?
It's not complex at all. I'm just wondering, like, how far does $73,000 go when you're talking about bulk buying, a
Exactly.
couple million pens and you have a little piece of paper?
And how much money can you save the taxpayers in each county? And by the way, take some of that money and pay for election officials that you can attract better talent, right? We can't always attract great talent if we're not paying people sufficiently. And these people work really, I have to say, I give a lot of credit to these election officials. They work really hard hours. They have an extremely hard job and they're under a lot of pressure and they're not paid enough. So you made a couple good points. So our South Carolina Constitution actually states that our votes shall be cast in secret, but not counted in secret. And unfortunately, the lawyers have used to twist that to say you can't know how your vote was counted. This is a huge issue. This is my bugaboo because I spent 2.5 years suing in the state of South Carolina, our election commission, just to get the cast vote records, which you guys get in Ohio, but we don't in South Carolina.
Really?
I wanted to know no. The conservative red state of South Carolina will not allow you to know how your vote was counted. So you can get the totals, but you don't get the detail. That's the same as if you got your bank account at the end of the month and it just has the number at the bottom, but you have none of the transactions. Or if you went to the grocery store and you got your grocery bill and it just said, okay, that'll be $102, and you have no idea what the detail is. So we asked for that detail. And for 2.5 years, we were in court. We were countersued because when you ask for information and you're an election desire, they countersue you. And so this is insane, but you're right. You have to separate. We cast in secret, but once you separate from that ballot, it's public. It's embedded in our Constitution. And by the way, we should all be able to see those ballots. We can't even see the ballots. We can't see the ballots when our state has logic and accuracy tests, which are fake ballots. We can't even see those. We can't see them during the audits. So this is a problem. That's a lack of transparency. And you're right. If we go to a more decentralized, bottom-up government from the precinct up, all those precincts need to be small, and we need to have complete transparency so we can observe the hand counting process so that people can be there in their own neighborhood seeing how their vote was counted. And so we always say that the precinct should be no larger than 1,500, because if you keep them at that size, you can easily count by midnight, because we tested, like you said, multiple things. Like literally we tested the color of the pens, the size of the tally sheet, the direction of the rows, we switching the color of the pens, literally counting by ballot versus race. It's been like a little pilot program where we've tested all these variables to come up with we felt was the best one. And we can count, like, let's say you had 200, we did 250 ballots, 11 races, and it took us about 2.5 hours. So that's with a team of 4. And so if you then take 1,000 ballots, because that would be about the turnout for a 1,500 precinct, if you had 4 teams, you could get that done in, say, 3 hours. And that's for a general election. So that's the worst case scenario. Now, if you think about primaries where you have a lower turnout, or a special election or municipal election, it's going to require far fewer people. And once again, the people are going to cost a lot less than machines, programming the machines, storing the machines, all the stuff that's involved with that, and updating the machines and the software for the machines and the maintenance of the machines. So to me, it's a no-brainer, but the system is fighting it, because the system, I don't know. I always think to myself, I don't know if you ponder this, Jonathan, how has Nancy Pelosi stayed in office for so long? How has Mitch McConnell? Why do we have people who are should be in a nursing home still in Congress? Clearly something's up.
I completely agree with you, but there's another element of that I don't want to let go of, or I don't want to move away from this before we point out what I consider to be the checklist of advantages in that scenario that you just described, Laura. If in the future or tomorrow, the day after the election, somebody cries foul and says, I think there was, I think somebody needed to do something different, or it was fraudulent in this regard, whatever, you have readily available, clear and transparent audit capabilities. You
That's right.
can re-examine, and if you can get the same results over and over again in a very public fashion, then you have a reliable bedrock for your election systems. You don't have that lingering question like that video montage that I played of all the far left Democrats crying foul and saying that our election systems are weak and full of fraud. And that, if nothing else, and I think that what you're talking about, for me, it checks all the boxes.
Exactly.
It looks to me from my perspective and following you and following gold standard elections, we have the ability to shave massive cost, make it less expensive, eliminate just burdensome complexity and really difficult, complex training, and this black box environment where we have these systems that clearly nobody trusts, and everybody's pointing to them and saying there's fraud there. And literally, to the best of my knowledge, nobody has access to. I mean, even a local elections official or a judge or nobody is allowed to go and actually
No,
view inside the machine.
that's
It
right.
is completely off limits, taboo, do not
Well,
touch.
it's proprietary
Oh, right.
for a
That
program to count dots on a piece of paper. And I mean, what is so proprietary about counting dots on a piece of paper, right? So it's crazy. And this is the beauty of the gold standard. It gets back to basics, and it's we have 4 phases, like we said: registration, validation, tabulation, and reporting. But what we do is we take 4 variables, which we call the pillars or cornerstones, that we apply to those steps. And is for all those steps: accessibility, security, transparency, and verifiability. And what you just brought up was both transparency and the verifiability. And what we do is, if we're hand counting and we have really good chain of custody, so it all gets here, and we propose to bring the absentee ballots to the precinct as well. Because once again, if I see an absentee ballot and I recognize it's my neighbor, I mean, I get it, right? We know if there's only 1,500 people in a precinct, we kind of know our neighborhood pretty well. And if we don't, somebody else will. But at any rate, we count it at the precinct. We do that in a bipartisan way. And we can even do things like, for example, scan the ballots. So we're preserving them and there's redundancy there. We have in our system, we have a camera that's mounted, on top of let me take it off. It's charging. We have a camera that's mounted on top of the ballot that's, going to a computer so we can see as the ballot's being counted who won. So we can even be a live feed if people want to watch in live feed time, or we could just record it, or we could use the scanner, either way. And then we have, like I said, the bipartisan talliers there's 2 people calling out, 1 person observing what the person's calling to make sure it's correct. And on the other side, there's 2 talliers, and there's a batch of, let's say, 25, 50 ballots, and they have to reconcile after that race is called, that batch. And if they don't, they call it again to make sure it's correct. So there should be, what we have found is once people are up the learning curve, there are very rarely recounts because it just starts working smoothly. And it's so easy. Anybody pretty much could do it, unless if people might have problems with their eyesight or, problems with their hands. If they're elderly, that might be an issue. But for the most part, most people can handle that. And when you think about it, how do we check the machines now? We do a hand count. That's the audit. And so why don't we just eliminate the machines and do the counting to start off with and save the counties a ton of money? And, people say, well, it's going to take too long. Well, I've already told you, it doesn't necessarily have to take too long. And then they'll say, well, human error. Well, reconciliation is fast and easy. And once they're up the learning curve, it's not a big deal. And by the way, that's how we check the machines. We do hand counting. We can't find enough workers. Well, that comes up a lot. They use that excuse a lot of why they can't do it. And Rasmussen, and I love the work they do on election surveys. I think that Mark Mitchell is amazing. I love him. His work is just phenomenal. He did a poll of likely voters, and he found that over half of people, it was 52% of likely voters, were willing to volunteer to hand count at a local area. Volunteer. So can you imagine if you paid people, I don't know, $30 an hour, $35 an hour, and said, hey, you get to count your local precinct or whatever. And I think you get plenty of people who be excited to be involved in the process. You could get high school, older high school kids doing it. You could get college kids doing it. It could be, and then you've got people who they're so engaged in the process. Then they're enthused about voting. What is our problem? People are disillusioned. They don't believe their vote counts. They see it as a black vote system. They feel disconnected from the process now, unlike ever before. So they're like, I'm not going to bother. We need to engage them. And by them feeling more confidence in the system and engaging in it as a civic duty, we could even have a jury, pool kind of system to recruit these people. You're going to find that people are going to actually show up for elections. We're going to have greater participation, greater accessibility. That's my feeling.
I love that. I'm not familiar with that poll, but it doesn't surprise me. There are a lot of people out there talking about how we get back to an elections system that we can count on, that we can rely on and feel like it's true and accurate.
But
But
what was interesting about this poll too, it was consistent across every party and every age group. And I thought that was pretty cool.
that's really cool.
Yeah.
So you take my state of Ohio, and I don't have the number off the top of my head, but however many billions of dollars that we spend on elections. I mean, we just had one completely unnecessary. It was a self-inflicted wound where we could have run one election and we turned it into two, and it was ridiculous. And I don't remember this. Just the second one, just running the second one was like $400 million or something. And just, yeah, you get some number of hours and offer to pay some people from the community to get together and just the idea to me is fascinating, and I love it, of like the community actually reclaiming and getting involved. Because I mean, originally, and that's where the term the people's business comes from. It's and you know this from my audience, we used to refer to voting, the process of voting, as the people's business. And I love that
Like that.
expression.
I
It
love
is. It's totally the people's business. So when you talk about this, the infrastructure, the machine, the cabal, whatever you want to call it, the sort of the swamp that
that.
runs
The deep state, yeah.
the deep state, uniparty, whatever you want to call it, the people involved with making sure that the election system remains as it is and doesn't get back to we the people. There's a clear several tells that I've seen. And one of the clearest took place in the state of Arizona. In Arizona, there was a county that voted unanimously, I believe, to go back to hand count, to go back to paper ballots. And they actually got threatened by the Secretary of State. They got a letter from the Secretary of State saying, "Don't you dare, and we're gonna smack you on the wrist if you do that." And no argument would suffice. It wasn't, we can do it faster, we can do it cheaper, we want it, we voted for it, our constituents want it. Nothing worked.
They
It
don't
was
care.
basically
They
the
don't
state of
care about
Arizona.
us. They don't care about us.
Yeah, yeah, they don't care about us. And the state of Arizona threatened this county. What was it, Cochise, I think, Cochise County, if memory serves. We've got some friends out there. And I tend to personally, and this is a recommendation for anybody that's concerned with these types of issues, watch what happens in Arizona, in particular Maricopa County, Arizona. It is a hotbed of issues and things very worth following. It's not really particularly directly related to this conversation, or it sort of is, but um, there are things that are informative to even the most sort of casually interested person in election systems. You can watch places like Fulton County, Georgia, Maricopa County, Arizona, and other places, like I mentioned, Bridgeport, Connecticut, and just watch and pay attention to what's happening out there. I think when more people do, the the um, the clamoring, the enthusiasm for a better answer will get stronger and bigger.
Well, the Department of Justice just asked to get some records and such from Colorado, so I think that they're on the warpath there. And certainly there's concern over, what happened to Tina Peters. But I think that, one of the things that you said was this whole idea of it's the people's business. And what that reminds me of is when Trump was inaugurated, obviously for the second time, he specifically stated that he was returning power to the people. And he wants to go, I think he also specifically stated that he wanted to make sure that we return to the constitutional republic. He really wanted to make sure that was preserved. And so when I think about that, the most important thing that he can do is to shore up the election system. Now, he can only affect really the federal system, but the point being is, and one of the things that I was involved with as a group effort was putting together what's called the People's Executive Order. And it's really an executive order that we sent to the Trump team to say, hey, yes, we saw your executive order of March 25th, and that's all well and good. And I can talk about that if you want more information about that. But we need to go further. We need to do more. And so the People's Executive Order really states a lot of what the gold standard is. It's really almost like an implementation order of how we would write the system. Because ultimately, if Trump does not fix elections, if he does not at least direct the states or call this a national, because we actually in our executive order state that this is a national emergency, and we are recommending that he establishes a national emergency authorization that would promulgate these certain orders to shore up the elections for 26. This is what needs to happen. And we cannot get rid of the deep state. We cannot get rid of trafficking. We cannot get rid of taxation that is crazy and criminality and illegal immigrants, etc., if we don't fix our election system. It all falls from that, because that's the power of the people. We only have the power of the pen, right? So give us our pens back and let us mark our ballots with them instead of using computers. And so to me, that's the most important point. And his first executive order it was a good first start, but we need to do more.
You said something very important to me. I want to pause and mention for you and for my audience here that as of about, 2.5 years ago, I never had any intention of starting a podcast. I work in finance, but I brailled my way through and ended up launching UnWoke.Academy, and I try my best. Over the last few days, I have given a lot of thought to this opportunity to engage in conversation with Laura Schar from Gold Standard Elections, and I've ended up with 2 pages of notes. And at the top of my original page, I have Tina Peters' name written and circled to emphasize it's what I meant to lead with. I'm brokenhearted, and I'm just, I think it's traumatic to our nation what's happened to Tina Peters. If you don't know her story, Tina was our guest. She was our 4th of July episode 2024. She joined me for a conversation. Go back and find that episode if you're not familiar with the story. But no nation can survive persecuting and jailing whistleblowers. Tina Peters, a Gold Star mom, she risked everything to get information out about our election systems. She was an elections official in the state of Colorado, and she's in prison for it right now. It was a kangaroo court. I have no respect at all for anything that was done to her, and it was outrageous. So I want to get her name out there again in this discussion. Thank you for bringing her up. Thank you.
And prayers for her, because, she did the right thing. She was doing her job, and all she did was make an image of her, forensic image, I guess, of her system so that she could preserve it, which is her job. And so what they did was they came in and actually messed with it. And when they looked at the before and after, because her preserved image versus their trusted rebuild, what happened after that, it was completely different. So they were trying to, once again, kind of hide the evidence of the crime. And because of that, they targeted her. And she's now in jail and she's serving, I think it's like a 9-year sentence, and she's a 70-year-old woman. And she's had a really tough time in prison. And so we hope that that gets taken care of soon, because that is not justice. We see people, and don't even talk to me about January 6th anymore after what we're seeing in LA, because that to me is horrific. And some people just walked into the building and walked out on January 6th and they were in jail. So I'm sorry, I'm not getting gaslit anymore. That's enough. I'm unwoke, Jonathan. I am
Yeah.
unwoke.
I'm exactly in the same mindset you are, and I've talked about that at length as well. My audience have probably heard more than one earful of.
They attack the people who are just trying to ask questions. Look at me.
Yep.
I just wanted to get a freedom of information request on how our votes were counted, and
Yep.
I was countersued. I went into one of our polling places and found that one of the security seals was completely removed. And I wanted to report it. And you know what happened? I got reported to DHS. Yeah. This is
Awful.
the craziness.
Yeah.
And SLED. And
These are
SLED.
the things that happen, and
Yeah.
this is.
Do I look really like I'm a danger to society here?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's what they do. It unfortunately happens a lot, and I'm sorry for what you've gone through and are going through. I think ultimately, most of us who put ourselves in this position of trying to fight for truth and what we believe in are being subjected to these terrible sorts of things. Don't mean that. Don't take that to mean that you too, my listening audience, shouldn't get involved in some way, shape, or form. Whatever you can do, be aware, understand, encourage better things, fight for it. That means anything that you want it to. In my book, I mentioned that Dan Schultz and I teach on precinct strategy. Come join us for that conversation. Maybe you find that's a fit. Advocate for better election systems in the state and county where you live, which means going to goldstandardelections.com, hit the website, follow Laura Shar on social media, watch those videos, and you may find that you're one of those people that gets interested enough, you start doing a little bit of side-by-side analysis. And what if you are the person that leads to your county saving millions and millions of dollars and getting better election systems that people count on? There's a possibility that you may have some big wins. I think most of us have. We're in the battle, and we take some punches. Laura has, I have, a lot of our friends. Tina Peters she's taken more than her fair share of punches, but all kinds of good things come out of it as well. This is
That's
just a little
true.
side note.
Hey, listen, I wouldn't get up every day and do what I do if I didn't feel passionately about it and felt that I'd met an incredible community of people and felt that just this amazing sense of purpose, almost like a mission from God. You know what I mean? And it's just, I didn't know anything about elections before this, but I certainly do now. And, I was really happy living my life. I was a financial person like yourself. I was doing professional and financial coaching. And this just happened. And it becomes something that tugs at you, right? You get tapped on the shoulder.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't give it up. I wouldn't do it differently. But yes, everybody, we need more people out there fighting the fight, because the more of us that get involved, they can't ignore us anymore, right? And it could be just as simple as educating the people around you. Hey, I heard this podcast and I think there's a better way, and I just want to explore that in my county. Or it could be just saying, hey, do you really feel confident about voting? I don't either. Let's write a letter to our legislators and our, Secretary of State or Election Commission. It could be simple act as that. But the more people that do that, the more likely we are to get true reform that we need so dearly. And right, President Trump. I mean, I basically said, hey, what's going on here? Let's get on with this election reform here. A lot of people are really fighting for this. I don't know if you know that, but let's not forget them, and let's get people like Tina Peters out of jail, and let's make sure that there's some justice all the way around. And that's what I feel is missing right now, Jonathan. And it might be a little bit off the topic, but it's the accountability piece. Like we voted for accountability. So at some point you have to punish the people who have done wrong. And that has to be very visible. And for example, the actual evidence of the 2020 election has to come out. It has to be disclosed. We all have to open up our eye. And for those people who aren't awake, they need to open up their eyes. And so until we see really some significant accountability, there can be no change, because I personally don't think our legislators and our election officials are going to do a thing until they're forced to do something. So it's got to be top down as well as bottom up pressure.
I completely agree. So, and I couldn't agree more on the whole sense of community thing. I have such great friends that I've connected with, and I've been blessed on this podcast. It was actually a friend of mine in Texas who convinced me. He was like, get a green screen and buy a camera and a microphone. And I was like, what actually is a green screen? Is it paint? What is it? Is it cloth? And so this was only like 2.5 years ago. And to be to the point where somebody like me can I have a background in finance. I work in finance, for heaven's sakes, and I'll launch a podcast, and we're over 21 million views.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. I don't even know that I set out with any particular goals, because I didn't know how to. I didn't know what was a reasonable goal. I just started talking to the camera, and I've had the great fortune of meeting people like you and having the pleasure of having you on this show. So, as we wrap things up, are there any wishes, encouragement, suggestions that you can offer our audience?
I think the key thing is that no one's going to necessarily we have to assume no one's coming to save us. And for a while we were told, oh, don't worry, it's all taken care of. No. It's really up to us. So I would just really encourage people to take initiative, even if it's small steps, try to get more informed, educate yourself, and really demand from your officials and your election officials and your legislators that you do want to observe the process, and you do want to know how your vote is counted, and you do want to be able to see all the election materials. And the other thing that they do is they try to charge you a lot of money for that, and it shouldn't be that way. Spread the news with family and friends. Let them know about the fact that we need to have elections for the people, by the people. And like you said, I would say that you're going to find, when you start doing this, it is really like a God tap. He taps you on the shoulder. You're like, dang, I guess I got to do this now. You might lose some friends. Like I've lost friends. I've lost relationships, but you gain like-minded friends, and you gain people who you really click with and you get. And so there might be a loss involved, but I certainly have gained more than I've lost. So, yeah. And I would just say, continue to, if you have a strong feeling for something you're passionate about, it's all tied to elections. So you got to fight for elections too.
Yeah, absolutely. So a thought occurred to me. I'm still marveling at this. There's so many things that might show up in your path if you decide to become one of those people that gets active and engaged and involved. And actually, my entry point was children. I served for 4 years as a board member, chair, and territory lead of something called Protect Ohio Children, fighting for K through 12 education. And way back when, it was fighting masks and jab mandates, and then fighting the pornographic material. I actually found out about 2 weeks ago, my wife was online doing a search and included my name. And apparently now I have an IMDb page because there's a Newsmax documentary called Transforming America about the education system in America that I factor into. So I have a role in that because I was interviewed, and parts of the interview were interspersed in that. I was like, what? How does this happen? I was like,
who knew?
a few years ago, I get my nose to the grindstone, and the area that I work in finance is not particularly all that visible. I work in institutional finance, and then suddenly it's totally like God taps you on the shoulder, like, hey, there are kids that are being hurt over here. And I was like,
And
nope,
if you
not
don't do
on
it,
my
who
watch.
will?
Yeah. I was like, all right, where? 'Cause I'm after it. And that one thing led to another, and all good things, all glory goes to God.
Yes,
There are all these
absolutely.
amazing things that come out of it. And I think because of people like you, we have a chance. We have a chance of fighting back and getting the things that we want. But they're reclaiming our constitutional republic, defending children, getting back to education, and maybe getting back to law and order, reason, logic, and secure borders, and all those sorts of things.
And sound money, which we didn't even get into because that's a whole other, but that's tied into all of this,
Yep.
all of it. And it's kind of scary. So, and I'm sure that's your, you have plenty to say about that, but we have a fiat system that is, I think, destined for collapse, but so we have to make sure that we can navigate that as well. And that's all part of elections too.
It all ties in, it's all interrelated, and that happens to actually be the tagline that I often use for UnWoke.Academy. This is where the freedom economy meets follow the money. We want to
Mm.
uncover all of the stuff and cover the major issues that put a spotlight on the bad actors, and issues like centralized banking, digital currency,
Central
all that stuff
banking.
that
Yep.
people are worried about right now, but
Mhm.
also highlight the good stuff and point out where we could be going, where we should be going, and what
Amen.
creates a better, brighter future for those of us in America. So, that
Amen.
sorry.
Amen.
Amen. Laura, it was a pleasure. Thank you again for coming on and joining me at UnWoke.Academy. Thanks to our viewing audience. I will drop this on various different social media platforms. You can watch a replay. Please do remember, like and share this. Go to the website. Follow Laura on social media. Are you on any other platforms other than X? Or gold standard?
Well, yeah, I'm X, and I have my own Telegram channel, and then, that's on my website, scsafe-elections.org, and then Facebook, but that's more, I never go on Facebook anymore, but X primarily.
You'll find her. And you can see the spelling of the last name, Scharr, Laura
Correct.
Scharr. Go find her. And if you care about elections, my friends, get involved.
Yes,
Thanks again.
especially if you're in South Carolina, for sure. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And Ohio.
Yes, and Ohio too.
Flags are for our two states.
I can hook them up.
Awesome. Laura, thanks again for joining us.